The Ancient Warning. The Osan Empire was vast, stretching across multiple star systems, its power rooted in traditions passed down through generations. Among these traditions, one stood out, etched deeply into the psyche of every Osan citizen: never, ever fight a human. This ancient warning was not born from superstition, but from a history drenched in blood. The Osans, once a fledgling race, had encountered humanity in their early days of space exploration. The humans, though fewer in number, possessed a tenacity and resilience that was unmatched by any species the Osans had ever encountered. They fought with a ferocity that defied their fragile appearance, and their capacity for innovation in the heat of battle was terrifying. It was this history that led to the Osans' cautionary tales, stories of entire fleets wiped out by human ingenuity, of colonies burned to ashes by their relentless pursuit of victory. But as time passed and the memory of those encounters faded into legend, the Osan Empire grew complacent. The newer generations viewed the warning as little more than a myth, a tale to scare children into obedience. Among these skeptics was Zaxxas, a charismatic warlord with ambitions that reached beyond the stars. He saw the humans not as a threat, but as an opportunity to prove the superiority of the Osan race. When the Terran Confederation, humanity's governing body, approached the Osan Empire for a trade agreement, Zaxxas saw his chance. Despite Emperor Linu's efforts to broker a peaceful alliance, Zaxxas and his followers launched a surprise attack on the human embassy, sparking a conflict that would shake the galaxy. The Osans struck with precision, their advanced weaponry decimating the human defenses. Ambassador Gabriel Reed, a seasoned diplomat, was among the few survivors of the initial assault. As he lay bleeding on the cold floor of the embassy, the words of the Osan extremist who attacked him echoed in his mind: "The only good human is a dead human." But even as Reed clung to life, the ancient warning resounded in his thoughts. The Osans had made a grave mistake. The humans would not take this attack lightly. News of the assault spread like wildfire across human-controlled space. The Terran Confederation, once a beacon of peace and diplomacy, now turned its full might toward retribution. Warships were mobilized, and the call for justice rang out from every corner of the Confederation. The Osans, who had underestimated the humans, were about to learn a harsh lesson. Admiral Terse Vaughn, a decorated veteran and commander of the TCS Invictus, was tasked with leading the counteroffensive. His orders were clear: bring the Osans to their knees. But Vaughn knew better than anyone that this would be no easy task. The Osans were fierce and well-prepared, but they had forgotten the very warning their ancestors had heeded. As the human fleet tore through Osan space, leaving destruction in its wake, the Osans began to realize the gravity of their mistake. Their ancient warning had been ignored, and now they would pay the price in blood and fire. The human response: Admiral Vaughn stood on the bridge of the TCS Invictus, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as the human fleet advanced through Osan space. The Osan forces, though formidable, were no match for the humans' relentless assault. Advanced human weapons sliced through the rebel defenses with precision, leaving smoldering ruins in their wake. On the surface of Ido Prime, the Osan capital, Ambassador Reed watched the blossoming fireballs of the human bombardment light up the night sky. His thoughts were conflicted. The humans were making swift progress, but the cost was high. Emperor Linu, standing beside Reed, looked grave. "Your forces are making progress, Ambassador, but Zaxxas remains at large," the Emperor said, his voice heavy with concern. Reed placed a reassuring hand on the Emperor's shoulder. "We'll find him, Your Majesty. You have my word." As the human offensive continued, cracks began to form in Osan society. In the streets of the capital, protesters clashed with security forces, some denouncing Zaxxas as a madman, while others hailed him as a hero of Osan independence. Whispers of discontent spread like wildfire as many Osans grappled with the realization that their ancient warning had come to pass. They had dared to fight a human, and now they were paying the price. Desperate to prevent the total collapse of his authority, Emperor Linu reluctantly agreed to a series of demands issued by the Terran Confederation. Human military bases would be established on Osan's soil, and trade agreements heavily favoring human interests were signed into law. The concessions were a bitter pill for many Osans to swallow, a humiliating surrender of their sovereignty to an alien power. Ambassador Reed watched as the Osan people struggled to come to terms with their new reality. The swift and devastating human response to the attack on the embassy had been a display of overwhelming force, but Reed couldn't shake the feeling that it was a sledgehammer used to crack a nut. How many innocent Osans had been caught in the crossfire? How much more damage would be done before the conflict was through? In a darkened room light years away, Zara Venks, a brilliant Osan scientist, pored over stolen schematics of human warships. Her eyes gleamed with a fanatical light as she began to gather a network of spies and informants throughout the empire, all united in their hatred of the human invaders. Venks knew that the key to defeating the humans lay in understanding their weaknesses, and she would not rest until she had unlocked every secret of their technology and tactics. The Osan insurgency, as the shattered pieces of the Osan Empire began to reform into a new and uncertain shape, the stage was set for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The humans, flush with victory and convinced of their own righteousness, pressed forward into Osan space. Meanwhile, the Osans, their pride wounded but their drive unbroken, began to plot their revenge. The ancient warning had been ignored, and now the price would be paid in blood and fire. On the bridge of the Invictus, Admiral Vaughn stood watching the stars, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The Osans had dared to challenge human supremacy, and they had been taught a sharp lesson. But Vaughn knew that this was only the beginning. The true test was yet to come, and he would be ready to meet it head-on. The taste of victory turned sour in Ambassador Reed's mouth as he watched the Osan capital from his office window. What should have been a moment of triumph had become a powder keg of resentment and barely concealed hostility. "Another protest, sir," his aide reported, handing him a data pad. "This one is outside the new human military base. The crowd's getting uglier by the minute." Reed's eyes scanned the report, his frown deepening. The concessions they'd forced from Emperor Linu were breeding a dangerous backlash. He tapped his communit. "Admiral Vaughn, we need to talk." Hours later, Reed found himself in a secure briefing room aboard the Invictus, facing the stern visage of Admiral Vaughn. "The situation's deteriorating faster than we anticipated," Reed began, pulling up hollow projections of recent intelligence. "Our heavy-handed approach may have won the battle, but we're losing hearts and minds down there." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "You're not suggesting we loosen our grip, are you, Ambassador? These Osans need to learn their place." Reed shook his head. "No, but we need to be smarter about this. My sources tell me there's a scientist named Zara Venks who's gaining influence. She's brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to seeing us driven out of Osan space." Vaughn scoffed. "One scientist is hardly a threat to our military superiority." "Don't underestimate her," Reed warned. "She's reportedly reverse engineering our tech, and she's got the ear of some powerful military leaders. We need to be prepared for whatever she has planned." Before Reed could finish, an alarm blared, cutting him off. Vaughn's comm crackled to life. "Admiral, we're picking up a massive energy surge from the planet's surface." Vaughn and Reed rushed to the bridge, arriving just in time to see a blinding flash of light erupt from the Osan capital. When it faded, a smoldering crater stood where the human military base had been moments before. "By all that's holy," Vaughn breathed, his face ashen. "What was that?" Before anyone could respond, the main view screen flickered to life. A familiar face filled the screen, his eyes burning with triumph and hate. "Zaxxas!" Reed hissed. The Osan warlord's voice boomed through the bridge. "Humans, you thought you had broken us, but you only made us stronger." The time has come for the Osan people to reclaim their destiny. As Zaxxas continued his fiery speech, Reed's mind raced. The ancient warning had been right. Fighting humans was a grave mistake, but now it seemed the humans had made an equally grave error in underestimating their foes. In the shadows of the Osan Imperial Palace, Emperor Linu paced nervously. The hardliners were gaining ground, and he felt his control slipping away with each passing day. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," Linu called out, his voice weary. Zara Venks strode in, her eyes gleaming with terrifying excitement. "Your Majesty, I bring news that will change everything." The Galactic Rebellion, as Venks laid out her plans for advanced weaponry and a bold offensive against the humans, Linu found himself nodding along. Perhaps this was the key to salvaging his legacy and restoring Osan pride. "You have my authorization," Linu declared. "Begin the preparations at once." Venks bowed deeply, a triumphant smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she turned to leave. "And Venks," Linu called out, "find Zaxxas. We'll need him for what's to come." The pieces were falling into place, and soon the galaxy would tremble at the might of a resurgent Osan empire. The Terran Confederation's intelligence network crackled with urgent reports. Ambassador Reed's eyes widened as he scanned the incoming data, his face paling with each passing second. "Admiral Vaughn?" he called, his voice tight with tension. "You need to see this." Vaughn strode over, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the intelligence. "Zaxxas's information checks out. The hardliners are mobilizing on a massive scale." Reed nodded grimly. "And Venks's new weapons are far more advanced than we anticipated. We're running out of time." In the days that followed, human-controlled space became a hive of frenzied activity. Vaughn's orders echoed across subspace channels as warships redeployed and orbital defense platforms were hastily constructed. Civilian transports fed supplies and personnel to key strategic locations, their holds packed to bursting. On the bridge of the Invictus, Vaughn studied tactical readouts, his expression resolute. "It's not enough," he muttered. "We need more time." But time was a luxury they no longer possessed. Deep within Osan territory, Zaxxas stood before a sea of faces, his voice booming through massive speakers. "Too long have we cowered in fear of the human menace. Today we reclaim our destiny." The crowd roared its approval as Zaxxas raised his fist triumphantly. In orbit above, Zara Venks oversaw the final preparations of the Osan Armada. Her new weapons gleamed wickedly in the harsh light of the shipyards. "All systems are go," a technician reported. "The fleet stands ready." Venks's eyes gleamed with fanatical intensity. "Then let us bring fire and vengeance to the stars." The Osan offensive struck like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Human outposts and colonies blazed as Zaxxas's fleet tore through their defenses. On a dozen worlds, terrified civilians huddled in shelters as Osan weapons rained destruction from orbit. Admiral Vaughn's face was ashen as damage reports flooded in. "They've broken through our picket lines in multiple sectors," he growled. "We're spread too thin." Reed's fingers flew over a console as he tried desperately to open diplomatic channels. "This is madness," he hissed. "If we don't find a way to de-escalate, both our species will be decimated." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The final stand. The Osan High Command, drunk on their early victories, pushed forward relentlessly. As the onslaught continued, cracks began to appear in the Osan war machine. Venks's untested weapons started to malfunction spectacularly. On the bridge of his flagship, Zaxxas watched in horror as friendly fire tore apart his own vessels. "What's happening?" he roared, rounding on a trembling subordinate. "The new plasma cannons, sir," the officer stammered. "They're overloading. We can't control them." Vaughn seized the opportunity, marshaling his battered forces for a desperate counterattack. Human warships surged forward, their weapons blazing as they tore into the now disorganized Osan fleet. Space itself seemed to burn as the two armadas clashed. Missiles and energy beams crisscrossed the void, reducing mighty vessels to drifting wreckage. On 100 bridges, captains barked orders, and damage control teams fought desperately to keep their ships in the fight. Ambassador Reed watched the tactical displays with growing horror. "My God," he whispered. "The casualties on both sides." Admiral Vaughn's voice was grim as he issued orders for the next phase of the counteroffensive. "We've got them on the back foot now. We press the advantage." As the titanic struggle raged on, neither side showed any sign of backing down. The war that would shape the future of two civilizations had only just begun. The void of space erupted in a cacophony of light and fire as Admiral Vaughn's fleet executed a series of precise maneuvers. Human warships danced through the chaos, their advanced propulsion systems allowing them to outflank the lumbering Osan vessels. "Pattern Delta 7, Vaughn barked, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Focus fire on their port flank." A hail of torpedoes streaked across the battlefield, slamming into the weakened shields of the Osan ships. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum, silent but deadly. Aboard the Osan flagship Vengeance, Zaxxas gripped his command chair as the deck shuddered beneath him. Status report, he demanded. We've lost 3 cruisers, sir, a junior officer reported, his voice trembling. The humans are picking us apart. Zaxxas snarled, banging his fist on the armrest. Where are Venx's wonder weapons? They were supposed to crush these vermin. As if in answer, a nearby Osan battleship suddenly went dark, its weapon systems overloading in a spectacular display of electrical arcing. On the bridge of the Invictus, Ambassador Reed watched the battle unfold with a mix of awe and horror. My God, Vaughn, your tactics are brilliant, but the cost... Vaughn's face was a mask of unyielding commitment. We didn't start this war, Reed, but by heaven we'll finish it. The Admiral's eyes narrowed as he spotted an opening. There, the Vengeance is exposed. All ships, concentrate fire on these coordinates. A barrage of human torpedoes sliced through space, their guidance systems locked onto Zaxxas's flagship. The Osan vessel's defenses crumbled under the assault, its primary weapons array erupting in a series of devastating explosions. Light years away, in the heart of Osan territory, Commander Jax Orion led his team through the shadows of a sprawling military complex. The elite human operatives moved with fluid precision, disabling security systems and neutralizing guards with ruthless efficiency. Charges set, Orion's second-in-command whispered over the comm. Ready to blow on your mark. Jax allowed himself a tight smile. Light it up. The night sky blazed as the Osan fuel depot went up in flames. As alarms blared and chaos erupted, Jax's team melted away into the darkness, leaving destruction in their wake. Similar scenes played out across Osan space as human strike teams wreaked havoc on supply lines and command centers. With each successful raid, cracks in the Osan war machine widened. A galaxy in flames in the halls of power on the Osan homeworld, tensions reached a boiling point. Zara Venx stormed into a high-level strategy meeting, her eyes blazing with fury. Your incompetence is costing us everything, she spat at Zaxxas. My weapons could have won this war if you hadn't squandered them with your ham-fisted tactics. Zaxxas rose to his full height, looming over the scientist. Watch your tongue, Venx. Your precious toys have proven as unreliable as they are flashy. As the two hardliners clashed, moderate voices like Korax began to whisper of alternatives. Underground resistance cells spread word of the true costs of the war, fueling growing discontent among the populace. The final straw came when Venx stumbled upon evidence of Zaxxas's secret bioweapon program. Horrified by the implications, she reached out to her moderate contacts, setting in motion events that would shake the foundations of Osan society. With both sides pushed to the brink, the unthinkable became reality. Planet-killer missiles arced through space, mass driver cannons pounded worlds to dust, and entire star systems became uninhabitable in the blink of an eye. Admiral Vaughn, his face haggard from weeks of relentless combat, issued the order for a final all-out assault on the Osan capital. As human and Osan fleets gathered for one last cataclysmic battle, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. The skies above the Osan capital blazed with the fury of two civilizations locked in mortal combat. Human and Osan ships danced a deadly waltz, energy beams and missiles crisscrossing the void. On the bridge of the Invictus, Admiral Vaughn's eyes never left the tactical display as he orchestrated the final assault. Bravo Squadron, punch through their flank, he commanded. Echo Team, prepare for boarding action on the Vengeance. As the words left his mouth, a blinding flash erupted from the Osan flagship. Its primary reactor had gone critical, torn apart by sustained human bombardment. The massive vessel listed to port, venting atmosphere and debris. Sir, we're detecting multiple escape pods launching from the Vengeance, a sensor officer reported. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Intercept those pods. Zaxxas must not escape. Across the battlefield, human teams swarmed Osan vessels, their advanced powered armor allowing them to shrug off energy blasts that would have vaporized unprotected soldiers. Commander Jax Orion led the charge on the crippled Vengeance, his team cutting through bulkheads with plasma torches. Zaxxas spotted on Deck 7. Orion's second-in-command reported over the comm. He's making for the auxiliary hangar. Not on my watch, Orion growled, sprinting down a smoke-filled corridor. The human commandos cornered Zaxxas as he attempted to board the last remaining shuttle. The Osan warlord snarled defiance, raising an ornate energy pistol. Orion's team didn't hesitate. Their coordinated fire dropped Zaxxas before he could squeeze off a shot. As Zaxxas was dragged away in restraints, the news of his capture spread like wildfire through the Osan ranks. Entire battle groups began to waver, their purpose crumbling in the face of their leader's defeat. On the homeworld, Zara Venks watched the unfolding disaster with a mix of horror and grim satisfaction. She had warned them of the humans' true capabilities, but the hardliners' arrogance had known no bounds. Now they would all pay the price. The price of Warvenks's community chirped urgently. It was Korax, his voice tight with tension. "Zara, it's time. The moderates are mobilizing. Will you stand with us?" She hesitated only a moment before replying, "I'm on my way." As Venks slipped out of her laboratory, alarms began to blare throughout the capital. The fragile alliance of hardliner factions was shattering, each group scrambling to secure power in the vacuum left by Zaxxas's fall. In orbit, Admiral Vaughn sensed the shift in the tide of battle. He keyed his comm, opening a channel to all human forces. "This is it, people. Push forward with everything we've got. Today we end this war." The human armada surged forward, their weapons blazing as they tore through the disorganized Osan defenses. One by one, the core worlds of the Osan Empire fell to Vaughn's relentless assault. On the conquered planets, Jax Orion and his strike teams worked tirelessly, securing critical infrastructure and hunting down hardliner holdouts. They moved with clockwork precision, guided by the intelligence Venks had provided. As human forces pressed deeper into Osan territory, Ambassador Reed found himself grappling with the magnitude of the destruction. Entire cities lay in ruins, reduced to smoking craters by orbital bombardments. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the cost of victory. Was there truly no other way? Reed murmured, surveying the devastation from the viewport of his shuttle. His musings were interrupted by an urgent transmission from Vaughn. "Ambassador, we've detected a massive energy buildup in the Zeta system. It appears the remaining hardliners have fallen back to a fortified redoubt." Reed's blood ran cold as he absorbed the implications. Dear God, they're going to make a last stand. As the human fleet massed for the final push, a chilling message crackled across all frequencies. The face of Zakara, Zaxxas's fanatical second-in-command, filled view screens throughout the armada. "Humans!" she spat, her eyes burning with hatred. "You may have broken our armies, but you will never break our spirit. If we cannot have our empire, then none shall have it." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by sensor readings that made even the most hardened veterans blanch. Zakara had unleashed a nightmarish bioweapon, a mutagenic plague that spread with terrifying speed across human-occupied Osan colonies. Admiral Vaughn's face was ashen as he processed the reports flooding in. "Millions are already dead or dying," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "Their bodies are twisting into horrific new forms as the pathogen rewrites their very DNA." "We have no choice," Vaughn said, his voice filled with a heavy sense of duty. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Sterilize the infected zones." As human warships rained fire upon the plague-stricken worlds, Vaughn turned his attention to the hardliner redoubt. The final battle for the fate of two civilizations was about to begin. The dust of battle had barely settled when the Terran Confederation's war machine shifted gears. Admiral Vaughn's fleet, still bearing the scars of their hard-fought victory, fanned out across Osan. Space. Warships became mobile customs checkpoints, boarding parties transformed into impromptu demolition squads. On the bridge of the Invictus, Vaughn watched as feeds from a dozen worlds flickered across his tactical display. Osan defense platforms crumbled under precisely targeted fire, their fragments drifting into planetary orbits. On the surfaces below, task forces methodically cataloged and dismantled weapons caches. "Sir, we've secured the Zethkor shipyards," a junior officer reported. "Engineering teams are stripping them of anything that could be repurposed for military use." Vaughn nodded, his face etched with grim satisfaction. "Good. Make sure those antimatter containment units are transported with utmost care. We don't need any accidents." Meanwhile, in the cavernous halls of what was once the Osan High Command, Ambassador Reed presided over a very different sort of conquest. The circular chamber, its vaulted ceiling still scorched from the final assault, now played host to a gathering of broken empires. Korax, flanked by a handful of shell-shocked Osan moderates, sat across from Reed. The ambassador's datapad displayed a list of demands that seemed to stretch endlessly. The Sirius cluster, including all orbital facilities and mining operations, will be ceded to Terran control, Reed stated, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Furthermore, the Riel-Beju trade corridor will be open to unrestricted human traffic. Korax's facial tendrils twitched in barely suppressed anger. You ask too much, human. Our people will starve without— Reed cut him off with a wave. Your people should have considered that before launching an unprovoked war of aggression. Now, shall we discuss the military installations we'll be establishing on your core worlds, or would you prefer to take a recess? As the grueling negotiations dragged on, a sleek diplomatic shuttle pierced Cora Prime's atmosphere. Its passenger, newly appointed Governor General Elias Kane, strode down the landing ramp with the confidence of a conqueror. Kane's first act was to requisition the sprawling compound that had once housed Osan's Ministry of Science. Within hours, a small army of human bureaucrats swarmed the building, setting up the nerve center of the occupation government. I want oversight on every power plant, every refinery, every damn farm on this rock, Kane barked to his assembled staff. If it moves, track it. If it produces, tax it. If it resists, his eyes gleamed with cold purpose, crush it. As Kane's iron grip tightened, unrest simmered beneath the surface of Osan society. In the crowded slums of Nexus City, a group of former soldiers huddled around a makeshift comm unit. Their leader, a grizzled veteran named Thax, listened intently to scattered reports of human troop movements. They've left the spaceport's western approach lightly guarded, Thax growled. We strike at dawn, for Adosia. The guerrilla war erupted with savage intensity. Human patrols found themselves ambushed in narrow streets, their advanced armor providing little protection against improvised plasma charges. Occupation officials' shuttles were shot down with alarming regularity. The human response was swift and merciless. Orbital strikes reduced entire city blocks to rubble at the slightest hint of insurgent activity. Kane's enforcers conducted house-to-house searches, dragging away anyone suspected of harboring rebel sympathies. In the chaos of one such raid, a young human lieutenant named Kan Hallstrom stumbled upon a scene that would haunt him for years to come. The village of Zarak Kesh lay in smoldering ruins, its inhabitants massacred in a display of overwhelming force. As Hallstrom's unit swept the area, a small sound caught his attention. Huddled beneath the twisted wreckage of what might have been a school, he found her, a young Adosian girl, her eyes wide with terror and grief. It's okay, Hallstrom said softly, holstering his weapon. I won't hurt you. The girl, later identified as Illa, remained mute as Hallstrom carried her to safety. In the days that followed, she communicated only through haunting sketches, stick figures engulfed in flames, monstrous shapes looming over cowering forms. As Illa's drawings circulated through human channels, a growing unease settled over the occupation forces. Soldiers whispered of the atrocities they'd witnessed, of orders that pushed the boundaries of decency.